In the first two videos of this series, we took basically a raw photo, and I'll show you where we started. We started here, raw photo right out of the camera, no changes whatsoever. And we're taking this through the entire camera raw process to show you how much power a good, well-exposed photo of a good subject, how much power camera raw has, where you can get all the work done in camera raw. You don't even need to go over into Photoshop, okay? So this is where we started, and then this is where we left off. And I'll just recap very quickly. We went into calibration. We changed the camera profile here, and that gave us a better starting point. We went into crop the photo. We came over to the basic panel. We did our white balance adjustments and exposure, recovery. We talked about fill light and blacks, clarity and vibrance. So where the last video left off was we've done all of our global corrections pretty much. Okay, now I want to start to do some specific, some detailed things to the photo, like just bring down the exposure of the waterfall a little bit. Well, that's where I would go over to my adjustment brush. So we're going to grab the adjustment brush tool here, and we can set a size of our brush. And really what I want to do is bring the exposure down. So I'll just click that little minus sign, and I'm just going to paint over the waterfall. I'm not even sure how much exposure, negative exposure I want. All I'm going to do is just paint over the waterfall here. All right. And if you look, you take a look at our before and after. That's before. That's after. I bled over into the area on the sides too much, so we can take it into erase mode, and we can just erase some of those edges there. Just like that. And right at the top. So once again, that's before, and that's after. All right, now it looks a little bit too dark for me, so we can come over here because we have our little pins selected over here. All right, if you just hover over it, you can kind of see that it's selected. So we have that pin selected. All I've got to do is come over here and just change the exposure, and we'll take it down to maybe minus a third of a stop or so. It's a little bit tricky sometimes. There we go. So right about there looks pretty good. So I've been able to darken the waterfall. Now, what I want to do is I also want to work on the sides here, but I don't want it to take the same appearance as what I've done to the waterfall, which is why I'm going to click on new, because this adds a new adjustment brush pin for me, if you will, because that's what these little things are. So now whatever I do to this new adjustment brush, I'm not affecting the waterfall. And what we're going to do, increase the clarity. I talked about that in the last video where I mentioned how I'd like to add clarity here, but it did some weird things to the waterfall. We're going to increase the clarity, and I'm just going to start to paint over these areas. And right over here on the left-hand side, just like that. And we're going to come over here to the sharpness slider, and I was able to add clarity, which is going to add some snap. In fact, let's kind of zoom in a little bit here, and you should be able to see that's before and that's after. So you see a little bit, it adds a little bit of detail in here. We're actually going to start to increase the sharpness here too. And that sharpness is really going to bring out the detail on the left and the right sides of the waterfalls, and without us having to go in and sharpen the waterfall, because we don't really want that to be over sharpened, but I do want to bring detail out here. So again, that's before, that's after. You should see some of that snap into place there. All right, I'm just going to do my painting right there. So now let's back out a little bit here so we can kind of see everything all done at the same time here. That's before, that's after. It's probably a little bit difficult to see on the full-sized image, so we will zoom in a little bit again. And again, that's before and that's after. So that's just the adjustment brush, and when we want to edit specific parts of the photo, that's what we're going to use. Now, finally, couple things to just clean things up here. I can't do much retouching inside of Camera Raw, but I do have this spot healing brush up here. So if there's anything I ever want to remove that's an exact spot or fits into a circle, I can do it, okay? And that's the key here. It has to fit into this tiny little circle. You can adjust the size of it, but it's got to be something that's not going to get messed up. So I'm going to click on that little spot. I don't know what these are down here, but they're not really doing anything for me. So we'll click on that, and then we'll come click over on this one, and get a really tiny adjustment brush. There we go. Click and drag, and that'll make it a little bit bigger. And then I can move these circles around after I create them, and I kind of tell, you can see where it's pulling from and what it's going to adjust here. So that's how I can control it. So if you have things that fit into this, great. If not, this would be a time where you need to go into Photoshop if you need to do your retouching. But a lot of these little tiny things I can get done. And unfortunately in this photo, that's all I really have to do. So it works out great. And if I were to finish this off, the very last thing to do here would be to come over to the effects panel. If you're using CS5, it'd be effects. If you're using CS4, you could just go to your post crop vignetting and come over here and just add a little bit of edge darkening. And that's just going to darken and kind of burn in some of the edges of the photo here. All right, you can go crazy. I'm not going to go too crazy with it. So let's come over here to the snapshots, and I'm going to create another new snapshot, which is taking a picture of the current settings here. And I'm going to call it after final. And we'll click OK. Let's fit the image into the view here. And so let's take a look. Here's our before image. This is, again, raw photo right out of the camera, no changes. Here is after final. All this was done right inside of Camera Raw. No Photoshop work. So if you start off with a good photo, a well-exposed photo, you can do almost all the work you have to do right inside the Camera Raw dialog, with the exception of maybe having to jump over into Photoshop if you have to do retouching. Fortunately, we didn't have to do that in this photo. So hopefully that kind of gives you a peek into the power of Camera Raw and just how much that you can use it. I do 80 to 90% of my work right here inside of this raw dialog box, and I definitely encourage you to kind of explore around it and try to get that into your workflow. It'll make things a lot faster for you.